So this morning, you may not be aware, but Holocaust Remembrance Day is tomorrow. On the Roman calendar, January the 27th, 2021. And if you have not known or have not noticed, I wear the yellow star in the honor of the people who died in the Holocaust, who suffered in the Holocaust at the hands of Christian nations. I know there are people who are offended by that statement. Well, Adolf Hitler was not a Christian. Yes, he was. He was a confirmed Catholic. The Protestants, along with the Catholics in Nazi Germany, did participate in the extermination of the Jews. And as I pointed out in a previous video, that the United States of America started that ball rolling. Now, so since the beginning of the world, this great fight has always been between Israel and the Gentile. And it started here in Genesis 3. This is after the serpent deceived Eve. Well, let me go ahead and go to Strong's Concordance so that we get on the right track at the very, very beginning. The Lord God? No, that's not what it says. It says Jehovah. See that? The proper name of the Elohim of Israel. Jehovah Elohim said unto the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field, and upon your belly you shall go, and dust shall you eat all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you, or between the woman, and between your seed and her seed. So from the very beginning, it was established that this great conflict, which started in the beginning at the Garden of Eden, will pit two groups of people against each other, the seed of Satan versus the seed of Eve. That seed of hers will bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Right. So I want to go straight to Psalm 68. There are many passages in Psalms where the secrets of Jehovah is hidden. And one of them is right here. But Elohim. The Elohim shall smite through, shatter. If the word is machatz, see? Shall smite through, wound, severely shatter. The head of his enemies. All right? Let's look at bruise. What does this say? Shuf. To bruise. Overwhelm, to rub off, to grind. Well, that sounds a lot like to break. To overwhelm, break, bruise, cover. It's pretty much the same definition, I would say, but it gives a stronger definition here in Psalm 68. He will strike through, wound severely, shatter the heads of his enemy. And the hairy scalp, or the hairy crown, of the one who continues to walk in his guilt. All right, so what does he do then? Adonai. Now, Adonai is in reference to Jehovah, and Adon is in reference to Yehoshua, just so you should know these things. Okay, so this is in reference to Jehovah. Will return from the east of Jordan. East of the Jordan River. I will bring my people again from the depths of the sea. What does that mean? Gather them from out of the lands of the Mediterranean Sea, from the west. All right? So he's going to come from the east and bring his people back from the Mediterranean Sea. Your foot will be dipped in blood, the blood of your enemies. You notice something? It's the same thing. And the tongue of the dog's the same. Now, this all happens, the smashing of the head. Of the serpent. This event in Genesis 3, verse 15. The latter part of it, and the bruise, bruise's heel is not the latter part of the bruise's head, it's the latter part of it, okay? So, the bruise his head is going to happen when he brings his people, causes them to return from the depths of the Yam, or from the Mediterranean Sea, or from the lands of the Mediterranean Sea where they were scattered among the Gentiles, among the Romans, among the Greeks, and all the way into the furthest horizons of the earth, as Moses said in Deuteronomy 30. That's when the smashing of the heads of the enemies is going to take place. So as I said, as I'm pointing out right now, the great conflict has always been between Israel and the Gentiles. And I've had arguments with people who misinterpret something that Paul says. And we'll go find it here in just a second. Where it says he is no respecter of persons. But they fail to read what he said just moments before. I may go to Acts 10, but what I'm looking for is Romans 2. I might go to Acts 10 just to see what that says, because I did not notice it before. This is one that I have gone to very, very often. Now, what did we just read? Are we going to forget what we just read in Psalm 66? Let's look at it again. Jehovah will shatter the heads of the enemy, the hairy crown of the one who continues to walk in trespasses. What are these trespasses that it continues to walk in? Well, he explains right here when he says he's going to come from the east of Jordan, and he's going to bring his people from the depths of the Mediterranean Sea. It means he's got to take them back by force because the enemies are not willing. That's what it means. The enemies are not willing that Israel should partake of the new covenant and return back to their own lands, as written in Jeremiah 30 and 31. So he has to do it by force. And if necessary, he'll kill them all, because it is written. So, he says, you are inexcusable, O man. Remember, Paul is talking to Romans, whosoever that you are the judges, because wherein you judge another, you condemn yourself. For you that judge do the same things. And we are sure that the judgment of Jehovah is according to truth against them who commit such things. And do you think, O man, that judges them which do such things, and you do the same, that you shall escape the judgment of Jehovah? Well, one of those things that the Gentiles love to do is accuse the Jews of killing the Messiah. Well, who actually did it? Who actually drove the nails? The Gentile, the Romans. Who was the one who raised the pole up in the air? It was the Gentiles, the Romans. Who was it that thrust the spear into Yehoshua's side? Oh, it was the Romans, wasn't it? Who was the ones who put the crown of thorns on his head? It was the Romans. Who was the one who took his clothes off of him and sold them? It was the Romans. So you Romans, for millennia afterwards, made these accusations against the Jews of killing the Messiah. Who do you think that Paul was talking to? What do you think he was talking about? Wow. And you did the same thing. You think, oh man, you that judges men who did such things, and you did the same thing, and you're going to escape the judgment of Jehovah? Or do you despise the riches of his goodness and forbearance and long-suffering? The riches and forbearance and long-suffering for Israel has long been recorded in the prophets. And even in Hosea, and Hosea 11, where he says that he's going to change his heart again. And he's going to have mercy upon Ephraim. And he's going to have mercy upon all Israel. And he's going to bring them back home. He's going to bring them back home from Egypt. He's going to bring them back home from Assyria. And he's going to bring them back home from the west. He says, my heart is changed within me. If you want to read Romans 11, I mean, not Romans, well, yeah, Romans 11, but Hosea 11, if you want to read that, it's all in there. His forbearance is great, and his forbearance is going to cause Israel to be led to repentance. But you, Roman, after the hardness of your impenitent heart, You treasure up for yourself wrath against the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of Jehovah, who will render to every man according to his works. To them who by patience continue in well-doing, seek the glory and honor and incorruptibility, age-long eternal life. But unto them that are contentious, or them who, let's see what this word says, from out among. Out and to. Let's see, let's continue. And do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation, and wrath. Yes. Hate the Jew, hate the Jew, hate the Jew, you Romans. This is what you did. This is what you did. And this is the reason why this exists. This is the reason why Holocaust Remembrance Day exists. Because you Romans, you did not obey the truth, but you obeyed unrighteousness, the righteousness of indignation and wrath. Vengeance. You said, kill the Jew. That's what you did. And a few videos ago, it goes all the way to the far reaches of the furthest reaches of the earth, away from Israel to the United States of America. They plotted the murder and destruction of the Jews as well. They called it eugenics. So now what? So he says this. So he is going to render unto every man according to his deeds. Now I will tell you this, folks. Here's the thing. It was Christianity, Roman Christianity, that caused all this. That means every one of you who remain in Roman Christianity, you are still holding on to the doctrine that caused all this. But you won't leave that Roman Christianity because your wife will leave you a cold bed at night. Is that the reason? Or is it because your children will mock you, laugh at you, maybe even call the police on you and try to get you arrested? Is that the reason why you will not walk away from the religion of wrath and indignation, Roman Christianity? Is that the reason? Well, I live by myself. It's not so bad. It's really not that bad. But you have to be willing to give it all up, folks, for the sake of these people. Look what they had to give up. Because of your religion. And don't sit here and say that Christianity didn't do it, because there was almost 2,000 years, or maybe even over 2,000 years, of dead bodies that are going to be raised up from the dead, that are going to give their story. Testify against your religion. Where do you think the word pogroms came from? Hmm? Look at it from the Jewish point of view. They can tell you all kinds of stories about your religion and what your religion has done. You can go on Google. All you've got to do is do this. There it is. Which one do you want? Do you want Ushman.org or do you want Wikipedia? All right, we'll read this. Many of today's Jews are convinced that the horror of Hitler's days was simply the culmination of centuries of Judenhass, Jew hate. But is this what happened? Were the baptized Christians of Europe ripe for the pagan nationalism of Hitler, Rosenberg, Göring, Himmler, and the rest? Well, it's because Christianity adopted paganism. I showed you in a previous video how the United States of America, its very foundation, is based upon paganism. I proved it. I've got the pictures on the video to prove it. Now, if we go and look at Wikipedia, this is probably a better, before the Christianity was ever even heard of, when Judea fell under the authority of the Seleucid Empire. That would be when Hellenism was enforced upon the Jews by the Antiochus. The process of Hellenization was enforced by law. And also, by the way, folks, all of Western civilization now is currently Hellenized. I've proven that. Requiring pagan religious practice. In 167 BCE, Jewish sacrifice was forbidden, Sabbaths and feasts were banned, and circumcision was outlawed. Altars to Greek gods, like what we see in Washington, D.C. and what we see in Rome. Yes, I've told you. Altars to Greek gods. Go to one of my previous videos. I don't remember what the last one was called, but if you've been watching my videos, all you have to do is go 2 or 3 back, and you'll see it. I got pictures in there to prove it. That the United States, well, for instance, you have the Statue of Liberty is based upon Helios, the sun god of the Greeks. You have the Supreme Court building is built after, in the likeness of, the temple to Zeus, who is Satan, the temple of Artemis, who is the daughter of Zeus, and the temple of Apollo, Apollyon, the destroyer, who is the sister of Artemis, son of Zeus. You see? So yes, the United States is completely and totally and absolutely Hellenized, to the point where not even the Jews, most Orthodox Jews themselves today, can literally keep the Sabbath. Yes, I said that right. But that's on the heads of the Gentiles, folks. Now, possession of Jewish scriptures was made a capital offense. Now, it wasn't that long ago in Europe that possession of Jewish scriptures or as the Christians would say, the Old Testament, the words of Moses and the prophets, would be made a capital offense. It was not that long ago in Europe. It wasn't that long ago. I'm just telling you. The Jewish Encyclopedia refers to the persecution of Jews and the paganization of Jerusalem during the reign of Emperor Hadrian in 117 to 138. The Jews now passed through a period of bitter persecution. Sabbaths and festivals, the study of the Torah, and circumcision were interdicted. So were they in Europe, not just during the Holocaust, but over and over and over again in previous generations. You know, the Holocaust was not a one-off, is what I'm trying to tell you, folks. It was not an anomaly. It was the norm throughout Christianity. And it seems that if Hadrian's desire to annihilate the Jewish people, his anger fell upon all the Jews of his empire, for he imposed upon them an oppressive poll tax. The persecution, however, did not last long. The Antoninus Pius revoked the cruel edicts. Now, this is where I'm going. In the Middle Ages, anti-Semitism in Europe was religious, and that it could only apply to you Christians. Although it was not a part of Catholic dogma, many Christians, including members of the clergy, held that the Jewish people collectively responsible for killing, as they say, Jesus. But as we know now, Jesus is a false deity of the Irish and the English that the Romans and Greeks later on adopted as their own because it matched their false idols. Yes, you see what I'm saying? So they held the Jewish people collectively responsible for killing their personage. Yet we read in Romans 2, right here, he says, why do you judge those who did the same thing as you do? You did. You did it, Roman. And you think you, old man, who judge, who do such things, and you do the same, but you're going to escape judgment? Well, you already cast a die. You Christians, you already made the judgment. This is the reason why I'm wearing this today. You already did it. It's too late to undo it. And Paul warned them against this, but they didn't listen. They did not listen. As years of persecution, and what we just see on Wikipedia. Although this interpretation, both the Jews presents as they claim Jesus' death, and the Jewish people collectively and for all time have committed the sin of deicide. That means you Gentiles, you Romans, who adopted this false religion, have condemned yourself, have damned yourself, as we just read in Romans 2. Or God-killing. For 1900 years of Christian Jewish history, the charge of deicide has led to hatred, violence, and against and murder of the Jews in Europe and America. Oh, this is so true. America cannot escape the crimes of Europe. They did it too. The United States of America instigated the Holocaust. And then they executed certain of the higher-ups among the Nazis for doing it, thereby condemning themselves and then sparing many of the rest, 1,600 scientists, mad scientists, and elites, and then scurrying off many hundreds of Nazi war criminals down to South America, never to be seen or heard from again. During the Middle Ages in Europe, there was full-scale persecution of Jews in many places, with blood libels, expulsions, forced conversions, and massacres. The underlying source of prejudice against the Jews in Europe was religious. You cannot say then that what Hitler did was not religious. Let me show you something. All right, let's read this together, shall we? Hitler was born to a practicing Catholic mother and was baptized in the Roman Catholic Church. His father was a free thinker and skeptical of the Catholic Church. In 1904, he was confirmed at the Roman Catholic Cathedral in Linz, Austria, where his family lived. Now, I wonder, because many cathedrals all over Europe, especially Germany and Austria, have this particular image of Jews suckling swine. Judensau, am I right? Remember, he was confirmed at one of these, a Catholic at one of these cathedrals. Judensau, German for Jews, sow, is a folk image of Jews in obscene contact with a large sow, in which Judaism is an unclean animal, appeared during the 13th century in Europe and some other European countries, is popularly lasted over 600 years. Now, the image appears in the Middle Ages mostly in carvings on churches or cathedral walls, and often outside where it could be seen from the street, for example, at Wittenberg and Regensburg, but also in other forms. The earliest appearance seems to have been on the underside of the wooden choir stall in Cologne Cathedral, dating about 1210. The earliest examples in stone sets to ca. 1230, and it is located in the cloister of the cathedral at Brandenburg. In about 1470, the image appeared on a woodcut form, and thereafter it was often copied in popular prints, often with anti-Semitic commentary. A wall painting on the bridge tower of Frankfurt am Main, constructed between 1475 and 1507 near the gateway to the Jewish ghetto and demolished in 1801, was a especially notorious example, including a scene of ritual murder of Simon of Trent. Okay? Now, where do you think Adolf Hitler learned his anti-Semitism from but the Catholic Church? But it wasn't just the Catholic Church, folks. No, it wasn't just the Catholic Church. Let's see here. Massacre, exile from various European countries. The persecution reached its peak during the Crusades. In the First Crusade, 1096 flourishing communities on the Rhine and the Danube were utterly destroyed. A prime example being the Rhineland massacres in the Second Crusade. In 1147, the Jews of France were subject to frequent massacres. The Jews were also subject to attacks by the Shepherds' Crusades of the 1251 and 1320. The Crusades were followed by expulsions, including in 1290 banishing of all English Jews. So Great Britain did it too. There goes the British Israelism false narrative. In 1396, 100,000 Jews were expelled from France, and in 1421, thousands were expelled from Austria. Many of the expelled Jews fled to Poland. This goes on and on and on, folks. How much of this do you want me to read, huh? As the Black Death and epidemics devastated Europe, and in the mid-14th century annihilating more than half of the population of people in Europe, Jews were taken as scapegoats. Rumors spread that they caused the disease by deliberately poisoning wells. Hundreds of the Jewish communities were destroyed by the violence of the Black Death persecutions, although so-called Pope Clement VI tried to protect them by the papal bull on July 6, 1348, with another following 1348. Several months afterwards, 900 Jews were burnt alive in Strasbourg, where the plague hadn't yet affected the city. Now, okay, so people want to say that, oh, the Pope was innocent. Oh, no, he wasn't. Because they taught supersessionism at their churches, at their cathedrals, that planted the seed of violence in these people's minds. See, once you plant that seed and the violence is committed, you are still an accessory to murder. You see? This is according to Gentile law, by the way. So if the shoe fits, you must wear it. One study finds that Jewish persecution and expulsions increase with negative economic shocks and climactic variations in Europe over the period of 1100 to 1600. The authors of the study argue that this stems from people blaming Jews for misfortunes and weak rulers going after Jewish wealth in times of fiscal crisis. Oh, yes. That's right. Coming up with all kinds of excuses to steal the money that the Jews had earned, and accusing them of all their financial ails, or otherwise, including physical ails. The author proposed several explanations why Jewish persecution significantly declined after 1600. One, there are simply fewer Jewish communities to persecute by the 17th century, and that would be the most accurate one. They nearly succeeded in wiping them out. That's the real reason. All these other reasons. This fifth reason is most certainly not true, as the Reformation produced Martin Luther, who was the most vile of all of the Protestants, and the Protestants, followers of Martin Luther, gleefully followed the lead of Adolf Hitler to murder the Jews. In the Papal States, which existed in 1870, Jews were required to live only in specified neighborhoods called ghettos. Until the 1840s, they were required regularly to attend sermons, urging them to convert to Christianity. Only Jews were taxed to support state boarding schools for Jewish converts to Christianity. It was illegal to convert from Christianity to Judaism. Sometimes Jews were baptized involuntarily, and even with such baptisms were illegal, forced to practice the Christian religion, and in many such cases the state separated them from their families, of which Edgardo Mortara account of this is most widely publicized incidents of acrimony between Catholics and Jews in the Papal States in the second half of the 19th century. Now, the Islamic states were also involved in this. As I mentioned before, it is obvious that Islam, Mohammedanism, or whatever you want to call it, is essentially a Protestant religion of the Catholic Church, if you want to know the truth. So, the Middle East, massacre of Jews in Baghdad, Yemen, in Hadrian's Palestine, because the name Palestine is the abomination created by Hadrian, the murderer of Jews. There were riots and pogroms against Jews in 1920 and 1921. Tensions over the Western Wall in Jerusalem led to the 1929 riots, whose main victims were ancient Jewish community at Hebron, which came to an end. During the Holocaust, the Middle East was in turmoil. Britain prohibited Jewish immigration to the British Mandate of Palestine, even though the mandate was a promise for all the Jews to be able to return home to a Jewish homeland in, as they say, Palestine. But the British forbade them. In Cairo, the Jewish Lehi, also known as the Stern Gang, assassinated Lord Moyne in 1944, fighting as a part of its campaign against the British closure of Palestine to Jewish immigration, complicating British-Arab-Jewish relations. While the Allies and the Axis were fighting for the oil-rich region, the Mufti of Jerusalem, Amin al-Husseini, staged a pro-Nazi coup in Iraq and organized a Farhud pogrom, which marked a turning point for about 1,500 Iraqi Jews who, following this event and the hostilities generated by the War of Israel in 1948, were targeted for violence, persecution, boycotts, confiscations, and near complete expulsion in 1951. And this same Mufti was, I believe, if I understand correctly, either the grandfather or great uncle of Yasser Arafat, the man, the terrorist that all these European countries, including the United States, loved to host in their lands. The coup failed and the Mufti fled to Berlin, where he actively supported Hitler. In Egypt, with a Jewish population of about 75,000, young Anwar Sadat was imprisoned for conspiring with the Nazis and promised them that no British soldier would leave Egypt alive, leaving the Jews of that region defenseless. In French Vichy territories of Algeria and Syria, plans were drawn up for the liquidation of their Jewish populations if the Axis powers were triumphant. The tensions which were caused by the Arab-Israeli conflict were also a factor in the rise of animosity toward the Jewish people all over the Middle East, as hundreds of thousands of Jews fled as refugees. The main waves fleeing soon after the 1948 and 1956 wars, and I happen to be honored to meet a granddaughter of the people who fled Iraq during this wave of fleeing after the 1948-1956 wars. It was an honor and a pleasure to meet this young woman who was instrumental in helping me, inadvertently or otherwise, push through on my quest to the truth about Israel's redemption, and of course about the ties between the Anabaptists and the Jews. On March 2nd, 1974, the bodies of 4 Syrian Jewish girls were discovered by the border police in the cave at the Zabdani Mountains northwest of Damascus. These sisters and their cousin Eva Saad had contracted with a band of smugglers to flee from Syria to Lebanon and eventually to Israel. The girls' bodies were found raped, murdered, and mutilated. The police also found the remains of 2 Jewish boys, Nathan Shaya and Qasim Abadi, victims of an earlier massacre. Syrian authorities deposited the bodies of all 6 in sacks before the homes of their parents in the Jews' ghettos in Damascus. Persecution of the Jews reached its most destructive form in the policies of Nazi Germany, which made the destruction of Jews a priority, culminated in the killing of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust from 1941 to 1945. Originally, the Nazis used death squads, the Einsatzgruppen, to conduct massive open-air killings of Jews who lived in the territories which they had conquered. By 1942, the Nazi leadership decided to implement the final solution, the genocide of the Jews, and increase the pace of the Holocaust by establishing extermination camps for the specific purpose of killing Jews as well as other undesirables as such people who openly opposed Hitler. And as I mentioned in a previous video, it won't be hard to find that video, folks. Go look it up. The United States, who professes today to be the friend of Israel, was in fact Israel's worst enemy. Because the United States planted that seed. The elites in the United States, and both political parties were involved. Theodore Roosevelt, a Republican, was a eugenicist, and what was his name? The one during World War I, the Democrat, was also a eugenicist. And to this day, the Democrat Party of the United States of America, the party that is in power today, still bows down and worships at the graven image of the one, I can't even remember what her name is, the one who started Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger. She wanted to kill all the Jews, and she wanted to kill all the Negroes. And to this day, government news organizations tried to fact check and what they say was Planned Parenthood started to control the black population. See, now, but along with the black population, they wanted to exterminate the Jews as well. Let's see here. Right. Give me a minute here. I'm going to go ahead and go to my YouTube channel. The video that I'm speaking about is this one. Is Israel's best friend secretly Israel's worst enemy? And then, see if I can find another one. May have to British treachery of the Balfour Declaration is one that should be read, should be watched. Did America help Germany exterminate the Jews? That's the one. So the article is this one: the horrifying American roots of Nazi eugenics. If you read this whole thing carefully, several times, you will realize, you will understand that the United States of America, the place where the most Jews are located today, planted the seed of the Holocaust. And Nazi Germany was the United States' partner in carrying the Holocaust out. I don't like saying that, but if you read this, you will know that it is the truth, and you will know that the Rockefeller Foundation was behind it, was behind Joseph Mengele, and you will know that currently the Rockefeller Foundation is behind the COVID-19 vaccines. You will know that, right, it says right here, in an America demographically reeling from immigration upheaval and torn by post-Reconstruction chaos, race conflict, and was everywhere in the early 20th century. Elitist utopians, the so-called progressives, the very same people who are in charge of the United States of America today, fuse their smoldering race fears and class bias with their desire to make a better world. They're still talking this stuff. With reinventing Galton's eugenics into a repressive and race ideology, the intent to populate the earth with vastly more of their own socioeconomic and biological kind, and less or none of everyone else. The superior species of the eugenics movement sought was populating not only merely by tall, strong, talented people. Eugenicists crave blonde, blue-eyed Nordic types. This group alone, they believed, was fit to inherit the earth. In the process, the movement intended to do this: subtract emancipated Negroes, immigrant Asian laborers, Indians, Hispanics, East Europeans, Jews, dark-haired hill folk, all the people who lived in the hills, the hillbillies, and the Pennsylvania Deutsch. That's right. The poor people, that would be people who lived on the Appalachian Trail and others that lived in the cities who were poor. The infirmed, the crippled, and really anyone classified outside the gentrified genetic lines drawn up by American raceologists. How? By identifying so-called defective family trees and subjecting them to lifelong segregation, sterilization programs to kill their bloodlines. The grand plan was to literally wipe out the reproductive capability of those deemed weak, inferior, and so-called unfit. The eugenicists hoped to neutralize the viability of 10% of the population in one single sweep, and then everyone else until none of those were left. Now, 18 solutions were explored in the Carnegie-supported 1911 preliminary report of the Committee of Eugenics section of the American Breeders Association, Carnegie. So what we have now is we have the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Institute involved in this. And who do you think is heading up this current situation we have going on? The most commonly suggested method of eugenicide in America was a lethal chamber or public locally operated gas chambers. Where did the Nazis get the idea from gas chambers from? The United States of America. In 1918, Popenoe, the Army venereal disease specialist during World War I, co-wrote the widely used textbook Applied Eugenics, which argued from a historical point of view the first method which presents itself is, that's number one, execution. That's killing, okay? Its value in keeping up with the standard of the race should not be underestimated. To execute people, that value should not be underestimated. That's what he's saying. Applied eugenics as devoting a chapter to lethal selection, which operated through the destruction of the individual by some adverse feature of the environment, such as excessive cold, bacteria, or by bodily deficiency, and today we have by virus. Man-altered virus. Nothing has changed, folks. These kinds of people are still alive, they are still well, and still very much in power. Now, eugenicists Now, President Wilson was a eugenicist. That was the one I was looking for. Eugenics set a set of beliefs and practices which aimed to improve the genetic quality of the human population, played a significant role in the history and culture of the United States during the Progressive Era. And they still use that term today. Might as well be called Nazi. From the late 19th century until U.S. involvement in World War II, while ostensibly about improving genetic quality, has been argued that eugenics was more about preserving the position of the dominant groups in the population. Scholarly research had determined that the people who found themselves targets of the eugenics movement were those who were seen as unfit for society, the poor, the disabled, the mentally ill, specific communities of color. A disproportionate number of those who fell victim to eugenicist sterilization initiatives were women who identified as African American, Hispanic, or Native American. As a result, and of course, they left out Jews, you see, deliberately. As a result, the United States progressive era eugenics movement is now generally associated with racist and nativist elements, as the movement was to some extent a reaction to demographic and population changes, as well as concerns over economy, social well-being, other than scientific genetics. Now, who were the early proponents? Well, we have right here Sir Francis Galton, British fellow. He studied the upper classes of Britain and arrived at the conclusion that their social positions could be attributed to superior genetic makeup. U.S. eugenicists tended to believe that in the genetic superiority of Nordic, Germanic, and Anglo-Saxon people, supported the strict immigration and anti-miscegenation laws. And I have to say that it was this very thing is what caused Franklin Delano Roosevelt to turn away the 900 Jews who were on a ship escaping the Nazis when they begged the United States of America for asylum. All I've got to do is do this. Roosevelt turned away Jews. It's on the Smithsonian, but this right here, the MS St. Louis was its name. The U.S. government turned away thousands of Jewish refugees, fearing that they were Nazi spies. Nope, that was not the reason. Nope. See, we know now that that was not the reason. That's a lie. We know the reason was eugenics. They could not have any more Jews coming in here, you see. So I will continue. And you can see that Edwin Black's book matches with what's written right here in Wikipedia. He had this American Breeders Association of all things. Memberships included Alexander Graham Bell, Stanford president, the president of Stanford University, David Starr Jordan, Luther Burbank. This is the American Breeders Association, folks. Several feminist reformers advocated an agenda of eugenics legal reform. The National Federation of Women's Clubs, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and the National League of Women Voters were among the variety of state and local feminist organizations that at some point lobbied for eugenics reforms. These were Christians. And who was one of them? Margaret Sanger, the leader of the American birth control movement and founder of Planned Parenthood. Sanger saw birth control as a means to prevent unwanted children from being born into a disadvantaged life, and incorporated the language of eugenics to advance the movement. Sanger also sought to discourage the reproduction of persons who it believed would pass on mental disease or serious physical defects. In these days, she approved the use of sterilization. And that's the reason why the doctors told my wife who has passed away since, that she should not have any more children. Because these people are eugenicists. They are still alive and well in all aspects of American society, including medical. In the Deep South, women's associations played an important role in rallying support for eugenics legal reform. Eugenicists recognized the political and social influence of Southern club women in their communities and used them to help implement eugenics across the region. Between 1915 and 1920, federated women's clubs in every state of the Deep South had a critical role in establishing public eugenics institutions that were segregated by sex. For example, the Legislative Committee of the Florida State Federation of Women's Clubs successfully lobbied to institute a eugenics institution for the mentally retarded that was segregated by sex. Their aim was to separate mentally retarded men and women in order to prevent them from breeding more feeble-minded individuals. Public acceptance in the U.S. led to various state legislatures working to establish eugenic initiative, beginning with Connecticut. In 1896, many states enacted marriage laws with eugenics criteria prohibiting anyone who was epileptic, imbecile, or feeble-minded from marrying. The first state to introduce a compulsory sterilization bill was Michigan. In 1897, although the proposed law failed to garner enough votes by the legislature to be adopted, it did set the stage for other sterilization bills. 8 years later, Pennsylvania state legislators passed a sterilization bill that was vetoed by the governor. Indiana became the first state to enact sterilization legislation in 1907, followed closely by Washington, California, and Connecticut in 1909. Sterilization rates across the country were relatively low, California being the sole exception, until 1927, the Supreme Court case Buck versus Bell, which legitimized the forced sterilization of patients at a Virginia home for those who had been seen as mentally retarded. And yes, folks, this Supreme Court, whose house resembles the temple of Zeus, the temple of Artemis, and the temple of Apollyon the Destroyer. You have the immigration restrictions, and then we just, with the passage of the Immigration Act of 1924, eugenicists for the first time played an important role in the congressional debate as expert advisors to the threat of inferior stock from Eastern and Southern Europe. Well, well, well. According to DNA websites, my dad is about 1/3 Eastern and Southern Europe. I guess that means my family too. The new act, inspired by the eugenics belief in the racial superiority of old stock white Americans as of the Nordic race, a form of white supremacy, strengthened the position of existing laws by prohibiting race mixing. Oh my, oh my, oh my, if you were to look at my DNA, they'd have a big problem with me. Whereas Anglo-Saxon and Nordic people were seen as the most desirable immigrants, and the Chinese and Japanese were seen as the least desirable and were largely banned from entering the U.S. as a result of the Immigration Act. In addition to the Immigration Act, eugenic considerations also lay behind the adoption of incest laws in much of the U.S. and were used to justify many miscegenation laws. In other words, they used them to enforce racial segregation laws. Both class and race factored into the eugenics definition of fit and unfit by using the intelligence testing. American eugenicists asserted that social mobility was indicative of one's genetics fitness. This reaffirmed the existing class and racial hierarchies and explains why the upper to middle class was predominantly white. Social mobility was indicative of, social mobility. What is that? The ones who always rise up to the top in society, I suppose. Okay. Well, I guess that doesn't include me. That does not include my relatives. It does not include any of the mountain Anabaptists, you see. Now, concerns over hereditary genes. It was believed that the damage done to people by diseases could be inherited, and therefore through eugenics these diseases could be eradicated. This belief was carried into the 20th century as public health measures were taken to improve health, and the hope of such measures would result in better health of future generations. And here we go again, Carnegie Institute. Report explored 18 methods for removing defective genetic attributes. The 8th method was euthanasia. Well, I guess we need to go and look up the Carnegie Institute today. Carnegie's science empowers investigators to demonstrate intellectual courage, challenge conventional ideas, and transform the world. Nothing has changed, folks. Oh, I would like to know current, what do you call that? Current members of the Institute. Well, I sure would like to know. Current politicians. Let's try that. See if there are any. I don't know. Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Oh, well, looky here. A bipartisan foundation, which means both Republicans and Democrats. It's a nonpartisan foreign policy think tank with centers in Washington, D.C., Moscow, Beirut, Beijing, Brussels, and New Delhi. Founded in 1910 by Andrew Carnegie, the organization describes itself as being dedicated to advancing cooperation between nations and promoting active international engagements in the United States. Well, well, well. Chairperson of the Carnegie's Board of Trustees is former U.S. Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker, and the organization's president is former U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns, who has been nominated to lead the CIA. Well, ain't that special? This thing goes on and on. Better baby contests, fitter families, compulsory sterilization, Eugenic sterilization in the African American community, as they say. Black support for eugenics. What the? Wow. Early proponents of eugenics movement included not only influential white women, but also several prominent African-American intellectuals such as W.E.B. Du Bois, Thomas Wyatt Turner, and many academics at the Tuskegee University, Howard University, Hampton University. You notice where these people do their thing at universities. However, unlike many white eugenicists, these black intellectuals believed that the best African Americans were good as the best white Americans, and the talented tenth of all races should mix. Indeed, Du Bois believed only fit blacks should procreate to eradicate the race's heritage of moral iniquity. It's the same thing. Who are they to judge their fellow man? What did we just read? You can't do that. With the support of leaders like Du Bois, efforts were made in the early 20th centuries to control the reproduction of the country's black population. One of the most visible initiatives was Margaret Sanger's 1939 proposal, the Negro Project. You see, these people just won't quit. Sterilization of Latina women, Puerto Rico, California, sterilization of Native American women, influence on, whoa, yeah, here we go again, influence on Nazi Germany, folks. You can't get away from it. You cannot get away from it, folks. This could take me hours and hours and hours, and they mention Rockefeller Institute right here. Genetic engineering eugenics after World War II. Compulsory sterilization prevention and continuation. They finally, in 1978, started preventing, they started stopping this. But no, they didn't, because the abortions are still about racial destruction or limitation of certain people of race. Eugenics in America had everything to do with planting the seed of the Holocaust, folks. Therefore, the United States of America will not be able to escape the wrath of Jehovah that is going to come upon the Gentiles for them persecuting the Jews these past 2,000 years. Ecclesia is going to be forced to bow down and worship at the feet of Synagoga in the very end. It is written in Revelation, and it is written in the prophet Isaiah. I'll end with Isaiah. Let me see, I'll just go straight to Isaiah, because it's there. Well, it's not cooperating. 60. Now, Isaiah 60 talks about the future glory of Zion. It talks about, arise, shine, for your light has come, the glory of Jehovah, not the Lord. You can see right here. For the glory of Jehovah is risen upon you. Darkness will cover the earth and gross darkness to people, but Jehovah shall arise upon you, and his glory will be seen upon you, and the Gentiles will be forced to come to your light, and the kings to the brightness of your rising. They're gathering about. Look at them. They gather themselves together. They come to you. Your sons will be gathered from afar, and your daughters shall be nursed at your side. You will see and flow together, and your heart shall fear and be enlarged, because the wealth or the abundance, the roaring crowd of the Mediterranean Sea will be overthrown. Doesn't say converted, it says overthrown, overturn, overthrow, 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 overthrow. How many times it has to be said? Will be overthrown. And the wealth, the goods, great might of the Gentiles shall come to you. Now, it says the coastlands will wait for me. The ships of Tarshish will be the first ones to bring your sons from afar. Who are these that fly as a cloud, as doves to the windows? The ships of Tarshish. And what are they going to be doing? They were coming from the coastlands, from the seas, and to bring your sons and your daughters and the gold and silver with them to the name of Jehovah Elohim, for the Holy One of Israel, because he has glorified you, Zion. The sons of the stranger shall build up your walls, and their kings shall be your servants. That's right. Their kings will be your servants, your personal servants. The kings of the Gentiles will be the personal servants of the Jews. Because in my wrath I smote you, but in my favor I now have mercy upon you, O Zion. Your gates will be open continually, and will not be shut day nor night, so that men may bring you the wealth of the Gentiles, and that their kings may be brought. Because the nation and kingdom that will not serve you shall perish. Those nations shall be utterly wasted, annihilated, dried up, laid waste, uninhabited. Any nation that does not serve Israel, Zion, will be emptied out. There will be nobody living there. Verse 14, the sons that afflicted you, O Jew, Zion, the people, the children of those that afflicted you will come bowing unto you, and those who had contempt for you, those who try to exterminate you, shall bow themselves at the sole of your feet. It is them. It's those people, the persecutors, the ones that did the persecuting of the Jews for these last 2,000 years. They are the ones who are of the synagogue of Satan. And Zion shall be called the city of Jehovah. Zion, the Kodesh of Israel. How beautiful is that? You will suck the milk of the Gentiles, and you will suck the breast of kings, and you will know Jehovah will deliver, is your kinsman redeemer, the strong one of Jacob. He's not just a redeemer of Israel. He is a kinsman redeemer. For brass I will bring gold. For iron I will bring silver. For wood brass and for stones iron I will make your police officers peaceful, and the taxman righteous. Violence shall no more be heard in your land, nor wasting or destruction within your borders. And I know you Christians, you say it's going to happen again, but you lie. Isaiah 60 says that you lie. It will no more happen again. You shall call your walls Yeshua. So the walls will be called Yeshua, salvation. And your gates will be called Tehillah, praise or songs of praise. The sun will no more be your light by day, exactly as written in the book of Revelation. Neither shall the moon give light unto you, but Jehovah will be unto you antiquity, futurity, everlasting light, and your Elohim, your glory. Your sun, figuratively speaking, shall no more go down, neither shall your moon withdraw itself, for Jehovah shall be your everlasting light, and the days of your mourning shall be amended, shall be over. When? When the time of the Gentiles comes to an end. You see, folks, oh, what did I just do? Let's try it again. When the times of the Gentiles comes to an end. Times of the Luke 21:24. So, right here it says, and they that be the Jews would fall by the sword, and would be led captive into all the Gentiles, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles until. So you Gentiles, you don't believe that until. You think that lasts forever. Well, you lie. Because the times of the Gentiles will indeed come to an end, will indeed be fulfilled, and I will show you in Strong's Concordance what this word means. We've even been given markers to make full complete. So once the time of the Gentiles is made full to be complete, this is exactly what we just read in, in Isaiah 60. All right. When the time of the Gentiles is complete, ended, finished, over, then there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars upon the earth, distress, anguish upon the Gentiles. Upon the Gentiles. Distress, anxiety upon the Gentiles. Now, he says this, When the time of distress upon the Gentiles begins, what am I supposed to do? What is Israel supposed to do? It says, lift up your heads, look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. It says, perplexity of the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man in the cloud with power and great glory, and they shall see these things come to pass. Then look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws nigh. Well, the Gentiles are in great distress. They are in great tribulation now. So who are these that are supposed to lift up your heads in redemption? Well, the non-Gentiles, the Israelites. They are the elect for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's sake. So says Paul in Romans 11, verses 25 through 28, 27. Says so. Cross-referencing. And immediately after the tribulation of those days, that's immediately after Israel's tribulation, and we just read, comes tribulation and anguish upon the Gentiles. So immediately after the tribulation of Israel comes a tribulation upon the Gentiles, as we just read here. Those are people in Judea. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away in captivities into all the Gentiles, and to all the Gentiles, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is complete, comes to a stop. And then there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth the distress of the Gentiles. So when the time of the Gentiles comes to an end, that's when the tribulation upon the Gentiles begins. That's when the head of the Gentiles are going to be smashed. And what next? And he will send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect. Israel is the elect for the patriarch's sake, from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Who is this gathering about? It is about the very first part of the new covenant, where it says, it's a light thing that he will send you to raise up the tribes of the people of Israel and gather them back and watch over them. But that has to be done. And they are not gathered yet. This gathering must be by a miracle. It must be by distress and anguish and tribulation upon the Gentiles, while the Gentiles are living it up. That all must cease. That all must crash down to the earth. Hellenism must cease to exist. This is what today's society is. It's Hellenism. It must be thrown down to the ground and destroyed. And when you see these things begin to happen, then you, Israel, who live in the uttermost parts of the earth, who are not gathered back yet, you will be gathered, every one of you, as is written in the prophets, as Paul said in Romans 11, verse 26. There's nothing that can be done to stop it. It shall be done. Every one of you with any sort of Israeli DNA in you at all, you must be taken back so that the promise to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob can be fulfilled. And I'm here telling you the truth, the unvarnished truth. I am not afraid to tell the truth. And what do I have in this short life? I don't have a wife. That which came from me has abandoned me. I'm by myself. I'm towards the end of my life. In this life, what in this world is there for me to fight for? The only thing left is the truth. So I'll fight for the truth. I'll stand with the truth. According to the words of the prophets and the words of Yehoshua, the Moshiach, the words of Jehovah, as written in the prophets and, of course, the disciples. That's what I'll stand for. That's what I will champion. I shall not be silent. So, in honor of the folks who suffered in the Holocaust and died, they will be raised up from the dead. They will. The scripture says so. They will have vengeance upon their enemies. The scriptures say so. And Western civilization will pay the price of vengeance.